producers who brought you RuPaul's Drag Race and $1 Million Listing. This is World of Wonders Wow Report. Things that make us go wow.
Hey!
Oh my God!
I'm Fender Bay, co-founder of World of Wonder. I'm here with Tom Campbell, our creative director, and James St. James.
My goodness, good morning.
Good to be here.
Yes, and what are we doing?
It's called the Wow Report.
Yes, we're counting down the top 10 things this week that made us go,
Wow!
Whoa! So, number 10, Tom.
Number 10.
I saw a film, a narrative film, not a documentary, about famed gay illustrator Tom of Finland.
Yes, hyper homoerotic.
Well, right, I just think of vast, big dicks. Where,
Hyper masculinity.
Big men in muscly men in leather.
bulging
If
out
you
of...
can imagine a world where Amazon, where just women of superior beings are,
Right.
Tom of Finland is a land where it's
Norse
a superior
gods of-
Norse god men.
Yes.
It is Finland's, it's a foreign film, but it's in English and Finnish. It goes back and forth. And it is Finland's official Academy Award entry for 2018.
Well, that's an interesting
with
thing.
that.
But it's fascinating to me because I went and I didn't know if it was going to be a doc or a film. Tom of Finland brought me there. And it's a film, and it's very sober, and it's very serious. And it's kind of in two parts because it's him in Finland from being a young man, which I'll talk about, and at war and all these kind of things, and being incredibly oppressed and suppressed as a gay man.
Right.
And his drawings were kind of sent across the sea. Tom of Finland is his pseudonym.
Was it something that he drew because it was like that was his the only outlet he had for his sexuality? Did he sort of draw the men that he was attracted to because there was no porn?
Here's the myth. It starts off, yes and yes. It starts off in World War II. And he's fighting, and it dawns on me, he's fighting for the Germans because Finland was, and you see him in terrible, awful battle scenes, and then you see him like walking through the park with a bunch of other soldiers that are going
Yes, now you're
cruising.
getting to it.
Yes, and he sort of sees this commander, this German captain, from far away, and they talk and become friends, and they know each other's names, and then he's off like peeing in the woods, and war just looks so awful.
Isn't
to me.
that always how it starts?
Yes, and a Russian
in the
plane
woods.
is crashing because they're fighting the Russians, and the Russian guy comes down in a parachute and he lands and he sees him and he charges him and he stabs him.
Stabs Tom?
No,
No,
Tom.
Oh, Tom is stabbing the
Russian.
Yes,
Russian?
because he's the enemy and he doesn't know what to do.
But is he hot? Is the Russian hot?
Well, you don't get to see him right
Well,
away.
he's
And it's
dead
sort of
now.
like a flashback, and it's kind of like a horrific time. And then he's, excuse me, then he goes back to, after the war, to live with his sister. It's post-war Finland.
Right.
He's having kind of like nightmares about the Russian. But when you finally see the Russian, you realize, you turn around, and it's the most gorgeous face you've ever seen, with a little mustache and a square jaw. And it becomes, in the movies, that's Cake.
The catalyst.
Kake is the one character that he would draw again and again and again.
Expiation.
Yes.
Oh my God. Is
So-
that true? So that's a true.
It's true, but it sort of speaks to, in a narrative way anyway, that it was all this kind of Russian uniforms
Right.
and all of that kind of.
See, I know it's
stuff.
difficult to talk about, but I'd heard he was very turned on by the SS uniforms, and that the Nazis, that Hitler basically refined the perfect homoerotic outfit,
Well,
and he responded
that
to
is
that.
true. I mean, that is one of those things that the reason why they say that the Nazis took off the way they did in Germany was because everybody looked good in those SS uniforms.
Yes.
And that it was something that the young men of the time really,
Yeah, and
took
he
to.
worked in advertising, as did his single sister. They lived together. She's very disapproving of any hint she gets of homosexuality. So he's sketching under his desk. He has a hidden pad where he sketches these beautiful pictures.
About
Yes.
that.
But then he like
Sketching.
goes to a bar or he goes out to a park as a civilian, and he starts making out with this guy, and then the police come, and the guy he's making out with gets beat by the police.
Oh, my God.
And he sort of like fakes it. He runs out of the woods and kind of like, hey, what's going on today, officer? So it spoke to that awful time when things are
Yeah.
good. So finally, somebody he falls in love. The guy says, you got to do something with these. So he hooks up with some American distributors, and he starts getting the stuff out to America. And unbeknownst to him, he's making money. He's feeling good about it. He becomes a huge
Cult figure
in the
in the gay
70s.
in the gay
And
community.
so now it comes to California. It's bright colors. It's 72 limos, and it's like
The porn era, really,
boogie
basically.
nights. And he comes out here, and and the movie gets a little not bad there, but it goes very quickly and time jumps. But and then they end with the rise of the AIDS epidemic and how at one time he was everyone was so scared and so homophobic that he's responsible. Part of that free love led us to AIDS, and that the Tom of Finland lifestyle, and there's a house in Silver Lake that is the Tom of Finland Foundation where they all hung out.
Well, did he live here then?
He spent a lot of time in California.
And now it's a museum as well, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes. So it's an interesting part of our history, and it ends with him feeling, working through the fact that he's not, someone saying to him, "You're not responsible for this awful disease," and it ends with a picture of cake, beautiful, one of his last drawings, and it's "Use a condom." But he died in 91 or 92. But it's a very serious, well acted, well written biopic about a gay icon illustrator. Very interesting.
Fantastic. So that's Tom of Finland playing in select cities. Check your local listings. James, what do you got for us at number 9?
Number 9.
I went to go see Suburbicon over the weekend.
How is it?
It's I'm conflicted.
Okay, good.
Okay, it's Suburbicon. It's directed by George Clooney. It was written by George Clooney and Joel and Ethan Coen. So you expect it to have a certain sort of pedigree, and it sort of to be and it sort of falls flat a little bit. It stars Matt Damon and Julianne Moore, who plays two different characters. She plays twins. Matt is it's 1959. It's sort of the suburbs, and it's sort of like this sort of hyper stylized reality. It looks sort of Tim Burton-esque, sort of like Edward Scissorhands-y, which is sort of at odds with it's a weird choice because it's such a serious subject matter, and it's Matt Damon may or may not be in with the mob. He might owe money to the mob, and there's a murder that he may or may not be a part of. And then there's also this sort of other storyline that's sort of parallel, and it's about an African-American couple that moves in next door, and they cause a riot because it's just... And you sort of expect the two storylines to meet, and they never do, or at least comment on each other, like as subplot usually does. It's very strange.
What's it about? And what's the sort of what is it?
Well, it's part
it's also such a non-revealing title.
Well, they think they're being meta, and they think they're being very ironic, like I said, it's very Tim Burton-esque, and yet it's partially a comedy. Every once in a while, there's sort of like this sort of cartoony violence that happens, and everyone sort of laughs and hoes. But for the most part, it's not very funny at all, and it's it's Matt Damon is sort of pudgy and not at his best, and I love Matt Damon. Matt Damon is one of my favorites.
Kind of an amazing cast.
Yeah, it is. And the little boy who plays the son, who sort of is piecing together everything that's going on, really amazing little actor. His ears, he has these huge, big jug ears that sort of...
So it's not a murder mystery?
It's not a comedy.
Not a comedy.
But it is a comedy, and it is a murder mystery, and it is a mob thing, and it is a race war, and all that stuff. But you sort of wish that it all came together in a way that it doesn't, and it
Can I say why this is an important movie in American history?
Why? Tell me why.
Because it sounds like it's not that good. It sounds like George Clooney's directing career may be coming to an end, which means he will run for president in 2020.
Well, wait a minute. One of the interesting things that I've sort of...
He directed a movie and didn't want to offend anyone, so it's it's a bit of this, bit of that.
But I buried the lead here. The reason why I'm talking about this is because if you see the way that it's been rolled out, in the way that George is going out and Matt Damon are going out and everything like that, the whole conversation is about the Harvey Weinstein scandal and what Matt didn't do or did not do for Gwyneth Paltrow and George Clooney, and it's overshadowed what should have been every conversation they have every interview. Nobody cares about the movie. Everybody's just talking about this.
But if the movie needed explaining in that way, how is it ever going to work? Number one, and number two, surely the story of the movie is 9 times out of 10, or even 11 times out of 10, more interesting than the movie itself. It's always
but there was no backstory about sexual harassment on the set. there's nothing like that.
Yeah.
It's just that the movie is so bad that all anyone ever really wants to talk about is what happened 15 years ago with Gwyneth and Matt. And it's sort of a sad comment on, like you said, George's career, that he's working with the stellar cast and Joel and Ethan Coen, and he cannot get this story correctly.
History books will say that this was the last movie he made. It's his bedtime for Bonzo.
Well, no, but it is a tipping point in Hollywood.
Well, speaking of tipping, I mean, I remember like Paint Your Wagon was a tipping point in Hollywood, right? Do you remember when the sort of Robert Cringely, who wrote the Accidental Empires book, all about no, not Robert Cringely. Who wrote that?
Wagon with Clint Eastwood, the musical?
It was considered this sort of turkey of all turkeys, and this point at which the sort of independent, the new independent,
it was the last
Hollywood,
big musical,
the last gasp of sort of
old studios.
Is Suburbicon the last gasp?
No, but by that
of,
logic, it would have destroyed Clint Eastwood's career, and his career just only soared from there. But
no, I'm saying Ronald Reagan, Bedtime for Bonzo. That's what this is. That's what this movie is. George is going to say, I need to be political. I need to follow.
Oh God, please no, please no,
please.
No,
somebody good looking. Why not?
Because we've learned we want politicians to do politics. I don't want another actor.
You cannot close that door.
I don't want a reality star. I don't want a reality star.
That's exactly.
He's
that's
not
already
a reality
happened.
star, and he was in the Golden Girls once.
And it was on Facts of Life.
You guys, you can't honestly be saying that
it's
you
Bill
want
Maher
him.
is the one who said that why do we trot out such turkeys, such unlikable people in the Democratic Party, do caucuses, Hillarys, and things like that? Because why don't you put out a movie star? Why don't you put George Clooney or somebody really appealing,
exactly,
who's smart enough to listen to smart people around him?
But that's what they said about Trump, that he was going to hire only the best people, and we believed him, and it's not true.
I think Trump and Clooney are slightly different.
No, you guys, no. We don't want a plumber to do your interior decorating. I don't want to.
All right, then Harrison Ford for president. Jeez.
Suburbicon is open in theaters nationwide. Not that anyone cares.
Where's my water? Why didn't anyone bring me any water?
No.
We hoped it would silence you.
Yeah, here's the wood.
You can't honestly believe you're just trying to rile me up. Is that what it is?
Well, it's working, so.
How about number 8? Shall we talk about number 8? Change of topic.
Yes.
Number 8.
Sticky Fingers. Sticky Fingers.
Not the Rolling Stones album.
No. It is the biography.
Not Tom after breakfast.
The biography of... I, for the longest time, did not know what Sticky Fingers meant. And I was saying,
what does it mean?
What does it mean?
Well, it's supposed that you, Tom, after breakfast, you've jacked off, you've got cum on your hands, you've got sticky
after breakfast is not a real expression.
What do you mean, like, is it like honey toast marmalade? Because when I have toast and marmalade, always get
toast and marmalade.
Sticky
I
Fingers.
don't have breakfast. I go straight to dinner.
So Joe Hagan has written this supposedly authorized, right, biography of Jann Wenner, and this is important because it's
the publisher of Rolling Stone, the magazine.
Yes, which is celebrating its 50th anniversary. And so,
Sounds very edgy.
And it's supposed to, Rolling Stone is supposed to have changed our cultures, changed our times.
Has Jann been doing it for 50 years? Well, he only looks like he's 50 years old. Is he like 110?
He's actually the same age as Donald Trump.
So he's 22.
Wait, he started Rolling Stone at age
1946, 21, I believe he was. He actually started he was working for another, but he was an intern or something. He had another magazine called Sunday Ramparts.
Oh, I love Sunday. I love me some Sunday Ramparts. The days I spent lolling about with Sunday Ramparts. Oh,
in your romper.
You are just out of control today. What happened to you? He met his wife. Jayne was receptionist there, and it said
but
that
he's gay.
Exactly. That's the whole point of the whole book.
I'm sorry.
So it's an authorized biography. Jann Wenner and Joe Hagan get together, and he says Jann Wenner's tried 2 previous times to have his biography written, and they've both fallen apart and failed. But Joe Hagan got the access, and he spent 100 hours with him. He wouldn't let him read the book until it was finished, and then when he did read it, Jann Wenner was shocked, appalled. He said, "Rock and roll set me and my generation free, musically, socially, and politically." I don't think so. My hope was that this book would provide a record for future generations of that extraordinary time. Instead, he has produced something deeply flawed and tawdry rather than substantial. And Jann Wenner's issue is it's a lot of sex And it's actually,
but isn't
frankly,
that what the 60s and 70s were about?
Yes,
So
exactly.
I mean, how could you take away the sex from the 60s and 70s?
I guess, like all great hypocrites, he doesn't recognize his own hypocrisy. And so, on the one hand, he was a sort of anti-war liberal. On the other hand, he was this rapacious capitalist. On the one hand, he was this sort of free love spirit. On the other hand, he was
Which sounds like the baby boomer generation.
Yes,
in a
nutshell,
because it was all 60s and free love until they got older and became Republican and needed to save money and needed to take over the world.
So Joe Hagan seems to have held up, and he says this. He said, all I've done is hold up a mirror to Jann Wenner. The thing is, he can't stand to look at his own reflection because it's light and dark, you know?
But reflection from it's like taking a selfie picture from above, I can handle. From below, I can't handle. Hold the camera a little higher.
So tell me about, you like the book? Tell me you're enjoying
I'm
it?
about 100 pages in, and I don't know if I'll get to the end, frankly. The book begins brilliantly with this John Lennon. Jann Wenner takes John Lennon to the movie theater, and they look at Let It Be, and John Lennon's boo-hooing and crying. And one of the things that set Rolling Stone off on its sort of trajectory was this amazing interview with John Lennon at the time that the Beatles were breaking up. You know, Jann Wenner, starfucker, super groupie, loved the Beatles, so for him to be with John Lennon was the ultimate. He then said to John Lennon after the issue came out, this interview is so good, so much, we should write a book, do a book. And John Lennon was like, no, thank you. So Jann Wenner went ahead and did it anyway, and they never spoke again. And I think that kind of motif runs throughout the book.
But that's exactly music. Because remember when, if your music was in an ad, it was considered blasphemy, and it was horrible, and you were a sellout. And now artists launch their albums with a Target ad.
The whole point about the whole 60s free love, it was always born to be sold. And I just think that it was always about capitalism. It was always a sellout from the beginning.
If you look at Rolling Stone, in the context of the late 60s or 70s, it's a magical revolutionary time that then the pendulum swings back.
Look at the legacy. I mean, did it really set us free socially, politically? What was the other word?
But where would we have been without it? I mean, think of the world without all
but
that.
I don't think it necessarily set us free, and I think its legacy. You know, Paul Morrissey, who was.
Well, I don't think that as human beings we can be free. I mean, but I think this is as far as it did something.
It put musicians and politics together. I remember they would send Linda Ronstadt to South Africa and have her report. You know, it was this weird thing.
And I do think there's needle a little bit
and there's more
society.
social consciousness with musicians. Not 100%, but they do things, and we
would still be in the 50s essentially. We would say, in which we are again. But wasn't there also a really interesting thing with the Rolling Stone? Actually, the band and Jann Wenner, is that they're a whole.
I think they didn't particularly like the fact that he took the title for the magazine from the band.
But then they ended up becoming great friends.
They had a kind of contentious relationship. Keith Richards, I think, says that Mick Jagger is like Jann Wenner in that they're both incredibly guarded personalities. But then Keith Richards adds, is there anything worth guarding? So it's a fabulous pitch fest. But what I really loved about it is the sort of, I guess it is heretical point of view, which is fame is power. This is Joe Hagan speaking. It's not like Donald Trump has any ideas. He's just a fame monster. And fame is a thing that Jann understood. Jann, I'm sorry. He helped invent it. And he says that basically there's a lot of parallels between the two in terms of their desire for fame, their pursuit of power, and our celebrity culture.
But wait a minute. How can you have a book about the 60s and 70s and then bring in all sorts of Donald Trump? I mean, do you feel like every single
born
book
in the same year, two chips off the same block?
But do you think that every single book that comes out of this generation is going to somehow refer to Donald Trump?
You know what's interesting is the author says that as he was finishing the book up, Trump was elected, and a lot of the people he had spoken to, and we're talking about the biggest names in rock, called him up and said, "Oh my God, every time I see Trump on TV, I think it's Jann Wenner." So, you know.
All right. Blake's finger is about to fall off. He's been going like this
Sticky
for a long
Fingers,
time.
The Life and Times of Jann Wenner and Rolling Stone magazine is available on Amazon. Oh, and for you, James, also there's a 4-hour celebration of Rolling Stone, November 6th and 7th on HBO.
No.
Might be more to your taste.
I'll watch with you.
What kind of dig is that?
No, you just speak so curmudgeonly today.
I think you're full of energy and fire.
Thank you, Vim and vinegar and.
Okay, here's the question. Okay, we've got to take it
I'm
away.
creating a counterpoint to
pop quiz.
this love fest between you two.
Here's the question. How many U.S. presidents were born the same year that Jann Wenner was born? And that year, by the way, is 1946. You're listening to The Wow Report on Radio Andy, SiriusXM.
You're listening to World of Wonders Wow Report.
Welcome back to the Wow Report, our countdown of the top 10 things that made us go.
Wow.
Oh, James, you seem a little
Let's do one more wow.
deflated.
Oh, sorry.
Welcome back to the Wow Report, our top 10 countdown of the things that made us go.
Wow. You nailed it.
So, okay, I'm Fenton, co-founder of World of Wonder. I'm here with Tom, our creative director, James, literary sensation, James.
Yeah.
And Blake.
Hi.
Blake.
Okay, so the question was, Jann Wenner, and I'm making a lot out of this, was born in 1946. Same year as Donald Trump, right? And I think they're very similar.
Is he president? Donald Trump?
Notionally, right? Okay.
Yes.
But how many presidents do you think were born in 1946?
I'm guessing 2.
I'll say 3.
I'm thinking Clinton and Trump. I have no idea.
Okay, Clinton and Trump. Yeah, I'll say 2 too.
Oh, okay.
Oh, and maybe George. Maybe 3. He said 3.
The winner is Blake.
Yay.
Yes, Donald Trump. Bill Clinton.
George W.
George W. Bush. Isn't that amazing?
Oh, they're all the same age?
Yeah.
That's a little weird.
Who else was born in 46, do you think?
You?
Robert Mapplethorpe, Patti Smith, and one of my personal favorites, Susan Sarandon.
Oh.
Okay, Tom, what have we got number 7?
Number 7.
It was a week of movies. I went to the debut of the documentary Mansfield 66-67, a documentary about Jayne Mansfield.
Oh, fascinating.
And, a lot is said about Marilyn Monroe, and there's books and movies and TV shows. And Jayne Mansfield is kind of...
More fun, actually.
She is. She's sort of shuttled to the side. No one really cares. This is a documentary done by David Ebersol and Todd Hughes, who I believe are partners in life. And
of the Ebersol family, is that like Christine Ebersol?
So.
And
I don't think
no?
so.
Okay.
And they admit that it's a documentary about her last 2 years of life, 66, 67 for the most part.
Which is, I'm sorry, but that's the big Anton LaVey period. Is
Yes.
That, yes. Okay.
Getting into it.
Church of Satan.
Yes. Yes.
Oh my God.
But they admit they don't have any of her children, and they don't really have anybody who knew her other than Mamie Van Doren has a.
I love me some Mamie Van Doren.
But for the most part, it's just the documentary about the gossip and legend of Jayne Mansfield.
Which I think is more fun than actually
That's exactly
getting
what they
deep
say.
inside. Yeah.
And yet you sort of do, because she lived her life out loud. They claim that she's sort of the first reality TV.
Well, she would go to the opening of a supermarket.
Literally.
Literally to the
They have pictures of her looking fabulous, by the way.
I mean, there was nothing she wouldn't do for publicity. God bless her.
John Waters talks about her. Tippi Hedren speaks about her. And the 66, 67, they call it 666 because what's Anton LaVey, for those who don't know, and I didn't know,
Right.
was this just showman, carny,
Right.
but he was a Satanist. And this is right before Rosemary's Baby, where it was just so against culture to have someone, he would dress like a vampire. He lived in his parents' old house in San Francisco, and he painted it black. And he had a tiger that lived in his backyard.
But the Church of Satan was actually sort of an interesting thing because they weren't really satanic in the sense that they were doing blood sacrifices and all. They really just were about living being true to yourself and sort of living out loud and sort of things that
and he was
they
on
were
talk
sort of
shows.
Wiccan, were they?
And they
Yeah.
said Liberace was into him. There was Sammy Davis Jr.
Liberace?
He was kind of a hip thing for a minute.
Yeah.
And so there's a picture of Jayne Mansfield who would do anything for publicity with her boyfriend, manager who was married, whose name I forget, but I'll figure it out. They go there, and there's pictures of her at his altar, which is sort of like a house with a coffee table with lots of holding a skull, and she looks beautiful. And dark Satan and blonde Jayne together, and she, in her own way, was challenging sexual mores. She'd done the first.
It was very much about free sex and free love and being yourself and being.
She was the
creative,
first American actress to do a nude scene.
Yes,
And she's gorgeous.
no idea.
And when I look at her, because you kind of make fun, they actually show Marilyn, because she was brought to Hollywood, or she came to Hollywood, but she was hired to be a threat to Marilyn Monroe. That was kind of the studio system. Right?
Yeah.
And they show Marilyn Monroe walking in Diamonds Are Girls from this silk, and they have Jayne Mansfield walking, and she's crazy. But you look at her and you think, well, those are fake boobs, and that's a padded butt, and those are pumped lips. No, they aren't.
No.
She looked like that.
Yeah.
She was an ideal. Talk of Tom of Finland. It was like Jayne of Mansfield.
Well, that's right, because the image I have of her is that she's getting out of a pool, and the pool is filled with little plastic statuettes of
Yes.
her. What were they? Were they hot water bottles or?
Maybe they were
what
flamingos because it was her pink palace on Sunset where she lived.
With the big heart-shaped bed,
Yes,
and
the
big
heart-shaped pool.
the pink shag carpet on the walls and ceiling.
Yes.
And why hasn't she endured the way Marilyn Monroe?
Well, she has in a way. I mean, I think she's a little more camp. I think she's
a lot more camp.
Yeah, because you had Diana Dors.
Yes, we did, right,
Who was
yeah.
sort of the same thing, but it's just sort of like Mamie Van Doren, Jayne Mansfield. Those women were more approachable. They were more for the gays.
And she had her ending is supposedly there's a whole thing you have to see it, but like there's potentially a curse from Anton LaVey on her boyfriend at the time, and he said you're going to die in a car accident to the boyfriend, and then he got into several accidents, and of course he was with Jayne when the infamous
She
car
was
happened.
beheaded,
She
yeah.
wasn't. She was scalped probably by the car accident. But
And poor little Mariska Haggerty was in the back
yes,
seat.
horrible. But they were sleeping, so they didn't die. But it's funny because it's bold. It is over the top. Peaches Christ is also someone who speaks to her,
sure.
and Mary Warnoff, who's one
Yeah.
of Warhol. She speaks. So it's an eclectic group of people, and it's somehow it's fun. I know it sounds like it's a very dark story.
It sounds fantastic.
It's a hoot. Mansfield 66, 67. It's a labor of love too. It's not an expensive doc, but they put everything they had into it.
But I feel like with Jayne, like she's somebody that like the gays can appreciate a little more because she tries a little harder and she didn't get quite as far.
Yeah.
And Marilyn has this sort of artistic veneer about her that
Yeah.
people have gone back and sort
Yes.
of, but Jayne is just, I mean, in the gutter with the rest of us. I love it.
Hallelujah.
Well, James, what have we got at number 6?
Number 6.
Well, I'm going highbrow from your lowbrow. I'm doing the Joan Didion documentary on
saw that
Netflix.
too.
Yeah, The Center Will Not Hold, which is from a William Butler Yeats poem. William Butler Yeats.
Darling,
Here I am trying to be all la-di-da. William Butler Yeats. It was made by her nephew, very affectionately made by her nephew Griffin Dunn.
The actor.
The actor, yes. Joan, of course, is the elusive and iconic essayist and novelist, one of the chicest women of the 70s. Nobody could accessorize like Joan Didion, I will tell you
Her
what.
sunglasses.
Oh, my goodness. And she sort of inspired a whole generation of female writers, I think. She wrote Play As It Lays, Slouching Towards Bethlehem, The White Album.
But she was an essayist, right? She wrote for magazines.
She started at Vogue, and then she went on to New Yorker and Esquire. She was married to John Gregory Dunn, who is also a playwright and novelist, and they were sort of an it literary couple in the 70s.
Because John Gregory's done brother
Dominic.
Yeah, Dominic Dunn. Yeah, so they
right?
were sort of a literary family that she married into, and they sort of dominated the 70s, I think, in a way that was really sort of fabulous.
And they lived up here on Franklin near Runyon Canyon. That's the hippie house.
That was the hippie house.
Yes.
Well, Slouching Towards Bethlehem, she sort of lived in San Francisco for a long time. She lived in Haight-Ashbury. There's a really amazing scene in it where there's a very famous scene in the book where she's at a hippie house and they've dosed their little 5-year-old girl, and the 5-year-old girl is tripping on LSD.
Oh, my
And she's
God.
writing about this, and they ask her, Griffin Dunn asks her what she thought in that moment as she was recording the story, and she thinks about it for a minute, and you're hoping that she'll say, like, I wanted to get out of there, I wanted to take that little child, I wanted to call the hospital, I wanted to call the police, I wanted to do something, and she just looks at the camera and she says, it was gold. Like she realized
She goes, as a writer,
that's
gold. She's not saying it with evil.
No.
She's being
but she
desperately
smiles.
honest.
She knows that was the moment that made her, and that's something that, like, as a writer, you live for those moments. And it's like this really sort of you think like, oh, it sort of opens up all these ideas to who she really is, because she's not somebody that anyone ever really knows outside of her essays.
Yes.
And she's been very sort of private her whole life until about 10 years years ago when she had a tragedy in which her daughter had pneumonia. The husband came home. She was in the hospital. She went into a coma. The husband came home. They were at a Thanksgiving dinner. He choked on something, and he had a heart attack
at home
and died. As the daughter, and then the daughter comes out of the coma, and then a few months later, she's walking down the street. She slips. She falls
at the airport.
At the airport, she has a hematoma, and she dies. So within the space of like 6 months, she lost her husband and her daughter. And so she wrote a book called The Year of Magical Thinking.
That got a lot of attention about a year or two ago.
Yeah, and that was made into a Broadway play with Vanessa Redgrave.
Yes.
And then she wrote another book called Blue Nights about the death of her daughter. And that both of those books have really sort of brought her into this next generation.
And I honestly I know who Joan Didion is, sort of the name. I knew the book about her dead husband, but it is a fascinating documentary.
Yeah.
And she's 80 and she's frail and she weighs like 79 pounds. And she has her glasses and she's not smoking anymore. And she uses her arms to express herself. And she's grabbing for words.
She's incredibly camp in a way that it's just chic as shit.
I am going to check it out. That is the Joan Didion, The Center Will Not Hold, currently streaming on Netflix. I just can't get past that idea of dosing your own I'm totally shipwrecked by that.
But it was the hippies. It was the 70s.
Okay,
She observed it.
Okay.
She also talks a story about having a party with all like Warren Beatty and rock stars up here on Franklin, and she went to check on her daughter, and there was drug paraphernalia on the floor.
Okay.
And she realized that the rock stars had used her daughter's bedroom to get high, and she was like, never again.
Okay, that's the 60s. Everything was different. Nothing counts. Okay, so
Number 5.
Pop Bitch. Do you ever read Pop Bitch?
What is that?
It's like a fabulous, juicy gossip site. And they like do a weekly sort of often blind items, but they're just fantastic. So Pop Bitch did this 4-part feature about American media. American Media is the company that owns the National Enquirer.
Oh, yes.
This is the most fascinating read. I mean, maybe you already know this stuff, but National Enquirer began in 1926. It was backed by Hearst. It was a complete failure. And then this guy in 52, a 26-year-old kid, Gene Pope, bought it. Now, the thing is, he had no money. And his real name is Generoso Pope Jr. So guess what? He's a kid of a mobster. And his godfather was Frank Costello, who's the boss of the Luciano family, known in popular culture as the guy on whom Marlon Brando based his voice for The Godfather. Okay? So armed with all this mob money, this kid buys the National Enquirer. And, he also gets money from someone else, an old schoolmate. He used to go to school every day. Guess who that was? Roy Cohen, the most evil lawyer ever known in history.
And J. Edgar Hoover, Hoover's lawyer, who then went on to mentor Donald Trump.
Well, exactly. So here's what happens. So armed with the money from Roy Cohen and the mob, he buys the National Enquirer, turns it into a huge success. This is fascinating. I had no idea. National Enquirer wasn't doing so well in the 60s. His idea was to put it in supermarkets. And he went to the supermarket and said, I will buy and pay for the stands that stand by the checkout tills. And so people picked up the National Enquirer as an impulse.
Yeah.
But because he bought and owned those stands, he licensed them out space to other titles. So and not only did he own the National Enquirer, he also was renting out the space. What a brilliant...
To people and us.
It's a brilliant idea to all the competitors of
Weekly
the rag
World
trade
News,
gossip. Well, of course, Cohen used the Enquirer to spread muck and broker power. And Roy Cohen, of course, introduced Trump not only to the mob who helped pour concrete for his buildings, but also to someone called Roger Stone, who's this sort of political skullduggery.
Yes. And the new owner of the National Enquirer is Trump crony.
Well, exactly, David Pecker. He's not the owner. He's the CEO of American Media.
Well, is he the one who also took over Us Magazine?
Exactly.
Yes.
American Media owns the National Enquirer. When Gene Pope sells it for $500 million in '88, they come in and they buy up Weekly World News, Star, Men's Fitness, Soap Opera Digest, Us Weekly, Radar, Online. It's all the same group. And David Pecker is the guy running it. What's the significance of David Pecker? He was at Hachette Media when they launched a magazine called Trump style.
Yeah. Well, if you look at Us Magazine lately, every single cover is
Trump.
Ivanka's day
And that's why I'm talking about this.
style.
Because here is Trump, this scandalous figure with a long list of sexual abuse, thousands of lawsuits.
And that,
in many ways,
businesses,
the ideal
bankruptcies.
subject for the National Enquirer to be on their cover all the time. But he never is.
Yeah.
And in fact, all the Republican candidates during the sort of run-up to the election were singled out and destroyed by the National Enquirer. Who do you think came up with all those stories? Roger Stone.
Yeah.
Roger Stone was the one behind, Carly Fiorina, Homewrecker, Ben Carson, Little Marco.
He was just banned from Twitter.
Roger Stone was, yes.
Because of his tirade the other day,
against from CNN, Don Lemon.
And of course, there's also that story about Karen McDougal, the Playboy playmate, who sold her story about her affair with Trump to the National Enquirer. And they sat on it.
They buried it.
They buried it. They bought it. And she, of course, is a reporter and columnist for Fitness Magazine and OK Star and Radar Online. I mean, just the whole thing.
Like the morass of hypocrisies and interconnected, and we live like in such disgusting times.
I guess it is.
Or we know more about it.
But it was
I don't know if it's worse or we know more.
But we don't. But we know more about it. But the 99% of America doesn't know this story.
One of the most fascinating tidbits of this 4-part pop bitch thing is that in 1999, and I've forgotten this, and I don't know if I was actually even aware of it. In 1999, Trump joined the Reform Party as a sort of wild card candidate, and at the motivation, it seems, of Roger Stone. And Trump was in this great interview with Tim Russert, talking about all the opinion polls said Trump would never. He said he never had a chance. One poll said Trump would get elected president. A poll conducted by the National Enquirer. And Tim Russert laughs and says, well, that's ridiculous. But it wasn't ridiculous because the National Enquirer very carefully polled all their readers. And the National Enquirer only gives its readers what they want. And what the National Enquirer knew and what Trump knew, even back then, was that he was really popular and that he probably would win. And in 1999, he says he wasn't going to run unless he won. And that's, of course, he pulls out because
Pre-Celebrity Apprentice, which really cemented him with that crowd.
I think it's absolutely fascinating. It's not really, if you're a paranoid conspiracy theorist, it's not going to be satisfying. And maybe the level of detail is too dense, but just to unpack the connections and the layers, it's absolutely fascinating. We have to take a quick break. I have a question. Almost 40 years ago, Trump was a client of Roger Stone's lobbying company. Okay, makes sense, right? Who else was a partner in that firm? We'll have the answer after the break. You're listening to The Wow Report on Radio Andy SiriusXM.
You're listening to World of Wonders Wow Report.
Welcome back to The Wow Report.
We need you to do that with a little more energy.
Welcome back to The Wow Report. We're counting down the top 10 things that made us go
wow.
And I'm Fenton. I'm here with Tom and James and Blake. Before the break, it was a long blah, blah, blah about Donald Trump and National Enquirer and American media. It's fascinating. Check it out on Pop Bitch. But the question was, almost 40 years ago, Donald Trump was a client of Roger Stone's lobbying company.
Evil Roger Stone.
And who else was a partner in that company, do you think?
Well, I'm going to say it was either Roger Ailes or Paul Manafort.
Roger Ailes, I don't know.
Hitler.
Nice.
Yes, Blake wins.
Yeah.
James, it was Paul Manafort.
Oh,
Yeah, there you go. It's a
there was
small
a really interesting
circle
thing.
of crookedness. Right?
His daughter went on a Twitter tirade the other day about what an evil man her father is. You need to sort of check that out.
Okay.
I can't remember her name, but just sort of look up Paul Manafort's
She basically
daughter.
accuses of murder, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, she that's
Oh, Dad.
I think it's just her stepfather, so there's,
Oh, same thing. Number 4, Tom.
Number 4.
I want to talk a little bit about a podcast that I listened to all 8 episodes of, and I have mixed feelings, but it's called Dirty John. and it's sort of in
Sounds promising.
Yeah. It's kind of in the vein of S-Town. Remember S-Town? How much we loved S-Town.
Club 7?
It's not quite as compelling, but what's kind of cool about it is it takes place in Orange County. It's a story that's about a year or two old. It's not that old, and it's reported. It's through the LA Times did this. It's their first podcast. It's true crime kind of thing, and I have mixed feelings just because it's been such an awful week, and the accusations and the terrorism and the things. It's like part of me halfway through is like, why am I listening to a murder? Like I'm such a wimp, but I did listen to the whole thing. And Christopher Goffard is the LA Times reporter.
Well, is it a little cathartic in these times to be listening to a podcast that is
a little bit? I mean, it's sort of like I really don't watch Law and Order, but people love Law and Order because it's like the beginning, middle, and end, and they figure something out, and it gets done. And justice is served. This is kind of that, but it's all about this woman who's 59. What's her name? I'm terrible. But she is Deborah Newell. She's 59. She's an interior decorator in Irvine. And I think it's called Ambrosia Interior Decorators.
Oh, I know them.
You do not.
I use them.
Such a big liar. They gave you this top. And she's on OkCupid or something. She's dating. She's been married 5 times. She's divorced 5 times. She's the perfect Orange County character because she's rich and beautiful and older. And you just like the car she drives and where she lives and everything's fabulous. And she goes on a date with this guy named John Meehan, who's Dirty John.
Dirty John.
And he says he's a doctor. He comes in scrubs. But he's like, looks like he's 55. He has several houses. He's just come back from the war where he's an anesthesiologist and and Doctors Without Borders. It's all a lie.
Yeah.
It's all a lie.
Yeah.
And she lets him into his house 5 months after dating.
It's every Dateline.
They get married.
Uh-huh.
She has 2 daughters who do not like him, and he does everything in his power to separate her from her daughters.
Yeah.
And someone said that it shouldn't be called Dirty John, it should be called Stupid Deborah. Because she was given every warning. Like literally at one point she finds stuff on his computer, but he's so good at manipulating her.
The D is probably so good.
Yes, and he does things for her. And she keeps saying, and this is the one thing I will criticize Deborah, she goes, he was always doing errands for me. He was cleaning he was getting the Range Rover cleaned. He was getting the Maserati cleaned. He was taking my dry laundry. I'm thinking like, you didn't want a relationship. You just wanted someone to run your errands.
But so Deborah's still around.
Yeah, she's narrating the whole thing. Her daughter, so like she didn't die. And it all starts off with this corpse and how many wounds, and there's a knife to the eye and a knife to the arm, how like brutally someone was murdered, which is how the reporter got interested because it was sort of from the sleepy little place. There's also a nephew of hers that gets very involved, and then they started.
Wait, who is the corpse?
Yes, who got murdered?
You're getting spoiler alert. Anyone who doesn't want to know or is halfway through, go to Channel 70 Love Zone just for a minute and come back.
You have to tell us.
It became very clear to me after a while.
Wait, how many episodes are in before you learn who dies?
8. You have to go to the 8th one. And it's him, and it's the one daughter.
The daughter.
Yes, the daughter who's Tara. Because Jacqueline's kind of feisty and will fight this guy, and Tara like wants to be around dogs. She's a dog groomer.
And it was Tara.
And he attacked Tara outside of her house
sexually.
No, he's waiting for her, and he has all this kind of like, kidnap stuff.
Yeah.
And he's ready to take her on, but he'd been sick and in the hospitals. He was down a few weights, and she has a little dog that was biting his ankles, and she's fighting him and using her rubber boots because she had just cleaned dogs at the dog thing. She's kicking him. And this other story, we had to wait till the last episode, but there's a girl who's like 14 who lives in this big complex, and she's just come from lifeguard camp. And she sees what's happening, and she runs down, and these 2 little girls, take this guy, and basically Tara takes the knife that he's using to stab her, and she just starts to stab and hit his eye, and she takes him down. It's I think I've ruined the whole thing for everybody.
I don't think you should have told us that.
You asked James, shame on you.
I can't believe you ruined everything.
that's really interesting, which will unfold, is his history of. He was married. He did this to like tens and tens of women.
Right.
It's every
But he never-
dateline,
he didn't
And he's pure evil. He's like it's hard
Right.
to describe him. Oh, everybody has good and bad. He's pure evil.
Did she
And
get
when you're
off then? Was
59,
it- did she- Okay.
when you're 59, you'll overlook those things because you just
I
need
know.
love so
and
desperately.
he would hold her and say that to the end of time, you and
Yes.
me, babe.
Oh,
and he
and
loved
of
her and
course
loved her.
you're gonna
So
believe
this was
it.
really just a warning for you. This
I
podcast
know.
doesn't really even
I'm
exist.
so lonely. I'll take anything.
I've ruined it. I've
It's like in Rocky Horror Show. It was a mercy killing. That's
Yes.
what Frankenfurter says.
Yes. Okay.
So, okay.
You made me tell the ending.
Number 3.
James.
Well, I also have a mystery. I also
How's it
have.
end?
I have the terror of the mystery of the octopuses found wandering a Welsh beach. It's very scary.
I hate to try octopi, sweetie.
No, but this says octopuses. The Guardian, your Bible says octopuses.
I those octopi, but you know.
Octopoo.
Anyway, dozens of octopuses have been spotted wandering along a beach in
Wow.
Wales. And every night, they've been coming out of the ocean, walking 3 by 3, 30 of them, 40 of them, and people don't know what to make of this.
But-
Like, what are they up to? We know how smart octopi are.
How smart are they?
Well, they're so smart. I mean, you can't keep them in a cage. You can't keep them in an aquarium. They have a tendency to get out of pick locks. They come out. They wander. They go through doors. They're very smart. They are one of the smartest planets. They're smarter than dolphin. Many people think they're actually aliens. Is
I
what it
think they're
is.
aliens. I mean, don't they look a
They
little
look like
alien?
aliens, and they have it. Like you can give them like puzzle boxes and things like that, and they will sit because they get bored
Rubik's
very
Cube.
easily, and so you give them Rubik's cubes, and they'll like solve the Rubik's cubes. Well, so anyway, they've started coming out of the ocean, and they're just wandering about at nighttime.
Just in Wales.
And we don't know what they're up to. They could be up to some sort of. They might be taking over the country. They might be.
They're amphibious. They can breathe air.
I think you're supposed to put them back in the water if you
Well,
find them,
but-
right?
but
because
that-
they're not doing very well out of the water.
Well, but that's
Is
what
this
they're
how
saying.
humankind came ashore?
I
Well, someone said maybe they're very confused by the bright lights of the harbor. Maybe they're dying off after summer or getting knackered after the recent storms that happened. Someone said that if you see them, you should probably encourage them back into the water.
Shoo, little
But
octopus.
wear gloves because they bite like mad. As the area they're exhibiting this odd behavior coincides with 2 areas hit by low pressure depressions associated with storms of aphelion brine. Blah, blah, blah,
So
blah.
you're saying they're depressed?
Well, I think they're up to something. I think they're planning some sort of takeover.
Can I create a hashtag?
Yeah.
Hashtag no more calamari. They sound too important.
There you go. I know.
We should
I know.
be eating them.
So anyway, I just wanted to put it out there that if you're in Wales and you're listening to this, be on the lookout for these crazy, creepy octopi that are possibly taking over the country.
And you've written some more about this story, I believe, on worldofwonder.net, right?
Is
on the
that
Wow
your way
Report.
to stop this?
People read.
I want to know more. I want to know more. I'm trying to fluff up your time.
Oh, well, no.
You've been fluffed.
Yeah.
Okay, number 2.
Number 2.
Oh God! Why did I it has been a bad week, so I don't know why I started reading this book, Fantasyland. The subtitle really says it all. It's called "How America Went Haywire." It is a 500-year history. It's almost 500 pages long. Why did I start reading this?
500-year history.
Yes,
So it starts before America to explain America.
Yes.
Well, I guess it would start, in the 1500s, I guess. When
It
we
begins
first...
very early, very early. I mean, I suppose it's like 400 and something year history. Let's not split hairs here. But I think it's like very... Kurt Anderson wrote it, who's a co-founder of Spy Magazine.
Yes,
Yes.
his name.
Very
And,
witty man.
Yes, and you're reading it and you're like, oh my God, you realize that, the earlier settlers weren't really escaping religious persecution. That's very much what we've been told, right? They were Puritan separatists, loonies, basically.
Yeah.
From the town of Scrooby in the Netherlands, and they came here to build a new Jerusalem.
Yeah.
And so, they didn't just found the country. They basically invaded it, and then they committed genocide.
Yeah.
I mean, No wonder we're where we are.
Well,
We're
no,
all
I mean,
living on an Indian burial ground.
We
Right?
are, but also
Yeah.
the strain of Puritanism still runs through American life, and all the founding principles that they came here on are part of our collective nuttiness.
The rapture was invented here. The
okay.
Mormons were invented here.
Oh well, I mean that right there.
you know,
I mean,
We got Donnie Marie.
And one of the actually, James, you might like this. You know, we think fake news is a recent thing, but it's been with us for the longest time. And because he says that Americans have a predisposition to believing exciting untruths.
I believe that. Yeah.
Story of our lives.
So in 1835, the New York Sun published a 6-part series called about how a telescope in South Africa had discovered life on the moon.
Wait, what year was this?
In 1835.
Oh.
And there were man-bats and hairy humanoids and beavers walking upright and blue unicorns.
I love the
and this was
hairy
a-
beavers walking upright.
I love
Exactly.
a blue unicorn.
If you got octopi on the beach, you know, blue unicorns, and it was a 6-part series. It was almost like a podcast,
Yeah.
right? And they had newsboys. In fact, the New York Sun invented the newsboy, and they were out hawking this thing.
Extra blue beavers on the moon.
It was a huge success. It was also, that was the same year that this guy, P.T. Barnum, ever heard of him?
No,
He
never.
purchased a black woman who claimed that she was 161 years old and was George Washington's mommy. And that was the beginning of P.T. Barnum's
Purchased a woman.
career. I know, isn't it? It's a sick...
I don't like any of
I
that.
don't- No, exactly. I mean, I think the sort of... I've got about 300 pages to go, but it's like it is a tale
So you're up to
of
about-
madness piled on top of madness. To me, it's any wonder that we're, as a country, as sane as we are. The fact that we're insane
Did you
makes
ever read
complete
that
sense.
history of rednecks in America?
I did not.
But you got it, didn't you?
I did.
Is it by your bedside?
It's on my Kindle.
Oh, okay. Because I think that's another one that sort of like it explains so much about our country, and
Right.
this is another thing that just sort of like we know that it's there, but we try and pass it off that we're above all of this, but we really aren't.
But I'm beginning to feel I have supped full of horrors. I almost can't take any more of this stuff. You know, I mean,
We might have to do a happier wow report
a
next
happy
week.
wow report. A happy wow report.
Sugar's good. Yum.
Well, we have to take a quick break, and when we come back,
I've got an idea. We'll do things we're grateful for.
oh,
Oh, that's
yay.
coming up. That's coming up.
Thanksgiving is
that.
coming. When we come back, we'll reveal the Resistor of the week, and of course, the number one thing that made us go wow. So, Wow Report on Radio Andy, SiriusXM.
You're listening to World of Wonders Wow Report. Things that make us go wow.
Welcome back to the Wow Report. It's that amazing time where we reveal the number one thing this week that made us go wow more than anything ever in the week.
I don't know what it is.
Number 1.
It's Vladislav Zirkov.
Oh,
Vladislav. Old Vlad.
Aren't you Vlad? You tuned in.
Yeah, I'm in this dark hole, descending ever deeper of sort of madness,
Honey, we gotta
fantasy
get you on some
land,
sort of, like,
noir.
antidepressants or
I
something.
need something. And
Yeah.
I started reading this article in the Atlantic magazine from 3 years ago, and it's about Vladislav Zirkov.
Well, wait a minute, but herein lies the problem.
Yeah.
You shouldn't be reading 3-year-old articles.
Why
that
not?
Are,
He is okay. Here's the thing. This has been an extraordinary week of just the tsunami of hate. I feel I cannot read my Facebook feed. It's like crisis, politics, and it just feels that all that social media has really done
That's
is
what I'm saying,
unleash.
honey. Go back and do
this-
like some Mad magazines or do some sort of fun musicals.
As I was going down this rabbit hole, I came across this article, and actually, he's a really interesting guy, okay?
Okay.
He's a theater major, he's an economist, he's an advertiser, and he is Russia's number one political technologist. And basically, well, his basic thing is he's sort of Putin's right-hand man. He's held many titles in the Kremlin for a long period of time. And it doesn't actually really matter what the title is. He's Putin's guy, right? And he is basically the author of any number of conflicting conspiracies, spectacles, scandals he is a stirrer of the pot.
the pogrom. They're the one. He's the one putting out there.
Yes, but it's not about a consistent philosophy of we are the right, we will oppress the wrong. It's kind of chaos fluffing of just anything will do. Like one moment he'll support a radical art gallery that is anti-establishment. The next moment he'll support and fund some sort of neo-Nazis to go out and beat up queers. It's this sort of setting of many
provocateur to tear down trust, to tear down society, to tear down civilization.
Confusion. And I just feel that where we are as a society in America right now is Putin is very much won, whether or not they colluded with Trump in the election is yet to be discovered. But the idea of this Putin concept of sowing confusion, of casting doubt on what is real,
so we doubt each other,
alternative facts, and creating an atmosphere
always poking the bear and
mistrust
always
and
keeping
antagonism.
This constant level of outrage machine going.
It's the age of accusation. Everyone's accusing everybody of everything. Everyone's guilty of everything. It's hard to even have a consistency.
Well, I'm outraged that you just quoted Drudge. How dare you go with the right?
You see, and here you are, bomb-throwing Molotov cocktail, Jayne
saying. Like, there's something in everything that you can be outraged about.
Exactly, and the notion that you look at your own feed and it's like you don't. I feel no moral consistency to know where I land on any issue.
Exactly.
It feels like, am I with them? Are I with them? Am I with them? Everyone.
But
can't
I just
we all
feel
get along?
upset, and I feel toxified. I am filled with
this morning. There was,
rage.
the Andy. What did we just talking about? Andy Dick was talking about on his.
He got fired from something for licking people.
For licking people, and I was thinking, but
you are licking me all the time, Jayne.
But Andy Dick, we know that Andy Dick is going to lick people. Like how can we be outraged 20 years into his career when that's all he's been doing?
The tolerance level is below zero right now.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And I feel like, that's the thing that the Russians have won.
Vladislav Surkov is the guy. He's the author of this. He wrote he's also a writer, by the way, and he wrote one of his short stories. In the primitive wars of the 19th and 20th centuries, it was common for just two sides to fight, two countries, two groups of allies. Now 4 coalitions collide. Not 2 against 2 or 3 against 1. No. All against all.
Yeah.
And they have it.
Can a leader emerge who can bring us together?
I don't know.
George Clooney, is that what you're saying?
Joe Biden.
How about The Rock?
Oprah, The Rock.
Britney.
Oh,
Britney.
Bernie. On that note, we can't top Britney for president. Come on.
Resistor of the week, then. Let's move on.
Well,
do you have one?
I had a new one.
Yeah?
Which is I want to salute the Halloween parade marchers of Greenwich Village in New York.
Yeah.
Less than 2 hours after this horrendous terrorist attack and the murder of 6 people senselessly by evil, and the president is out ranting and raving.
Right.
There's this amazing picture I found that in New York City, people were lining up in costume in Greenwich Village to do the annual Halloween parade.
2 million people went on the march. It's amazing.
Right? Yeah, you cannot keep the New Yorkers. You cannot keep New Yorkers down. Number one, and number two, it's that very World War II British thing. Keep calm, carry on.
That's
right.
Just
stiff upper lip.
It's hard to remember.
Don't let them win
because the news so over-covers those events.
Yeah.
And my brother and sister, who are very practical and very liberal and very caring people, say, Tom, because we all should we go out? Should we leave? Should we go to New York this weekend? And it's like, statistically, we're in no more harm's way than we were before that.
Yeah.
Statistically, don't let it get to you.
And also, there is something to be said, Fenton, especially you, that just turn off the TV, turn off your Facebook.
I'm thinking of taking a media break.
Yeah, just for a day, just take a media break
the rest
and
of my life.
And maybe it will cheer you up a little.
Yeah.
That's perfect.
Be in the moment, literally and physically. And everything. All right.
So that's a perfect moment for me to say that's all we have time for today, right?
Just watch some Golden Girls.
Yes.
But this week now more than ever, whatever. I'm jumping to the end of the show. We need to go out and do something that makes the world go wow.
We do.
We're not there yet.
No, we are. I think we are. I couldn't have said it better myself.
Okay, good.
So same time, same place next week.
Yeah.
Until then.
No, not 8:30. Let's do it. Not same.
We pretend this is live. We pretend this is live.
I thought you. I know.
Stay tuned for a show that's a little more organized on Radio Andy, SiriusXM.
That's all we have time for today, but fantastic. Yes, until then, same time, same place next week. Go out and do something that makes the world go
Wow.
Oh, and this just in, this will cheer you up, James. Tickets on sale today for RuPaul's DragCon Los Angeles 2018, May 11th, 12th, and 13th.
3 days.
LA Convention Center, RuPaul'sDragCon.com. All this and more, you guys, at worldofwonder.net/Radio Andy.
I think we wowed already.
I think we wowed ourselves.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.